Hi, and welcome to the I T'd Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 65. What can power washers teach us about displays? So, displays. Power washers. Power washers. If you don't know what they are the devices that you use that pressurize water to wash things. Yeah, if you've ever seen the videos where they power wash a carpet or a side of a building or sidewalk, it's so just oddly satisfying. Oh my God. It's so good. But messing with power washers is also pretty fun. Power washing your car can be very satisfying. They have the power washer car washes that, blast a car clean using just the pressure of water and whatnot. But power washing, it works off of the concept of that water pressurization. And there are a couple of ways that this is done. The first is that power washers will attempt to take water and sort of put it into a chamber that then pushes it as close together as it possibly can be and then feeds it through a line. Water doesn't really compress well. If you've ever taken a physics course or a chemistry course, you might understand why, but because of the way that water is shaped geometrically, it really doesn't compress well. In fact, when water really only expands really easily, and that's in ice, but water doesn't compress well. And because of that, it's really hard to get a lot of pressure, or there's a lot of pressure with very little work. So what we do with a compressor is basically we are squeezing water into a chamber that then has a small escape valve on it. And this is also how you can increase pressure in just about anything water related. You can also do it with air, but air compresses a lot easier just because there's a lot of different compounds in air, and air doesn't take up that much space. Anyway, with water, you get a high pressurization with just compressing the space, having that outlet, and then having a small feed out or outlet on the end that allows the water to go out. And that is really what can allow your water to become as pressurized as possible, is the absolute smallest space possible for the water to escape from will have the highest amount of pressure that comes out of the end. And power washers can be so high pressurized that they can actually end up causing physical harm. If you were to spray a power washer, at a person, even at your own hand, it can do severe damage. It can have significant lacerations. It can even sever limbs. If you ever want to see the power of pressurized water, just look up water precision cutter, and you'll see how water can be used basically like a laser cutter. And this is how they cut a lot of tiles and metals and things like that, things that are sensitive in nature for one reason or another. You can actually cut them with water instead of having a saw or a laser even. So, all that being said, what the fuck does this have to do with displays? Talked a lot about how power washers work, but how do displays work? So, displays are generally, what I mean by display is the monitor or output of your video output of your computer system. So, for instance, on a gaming system, that's to a TV. For normal desktops, that's to a monitor. And all of this is designed to work off of the video processor of the system. Now, way back in the before times, long ago, video was not a necessary given of a computer system. There wasn't necessarily a computer or a video out on computers. You had to have a separate video card. I mean, we've basically gone full circle, and there are now computer systems that have no video out. But it used to be that you had to have a separate video processing board in order to get even the video. And so you could buy like a Coleco system that would do calculations for you and would output to various devices. But one of them wasn't necessarily a display. It wasn't a monitor. It wasn't a TV. It wasn't any sort of human readable text. It would go out to something else that would then print your output. So how we get displays now is we have a video processing board, and most CPUs, most modern central processing units come with some sort of video processing unit. They have this graphical processor or some sort of subset of cores that will do video processing for simple display purposes. Now, when we say simple, we're not talking about the true simple, like just plain text, 80 by 80 characters, which is what it used to be, that you would have a display on a graphics processing unit simply display out to a 80 by 80 grid. But now the way that it works is that the processor can now effectively process every pixel in a 1920 by 1080 display all at once. Processors now go up to 4K, 8K, 12K, 16K, whatever. They all do it. They all have the capacity to do it. Really, at this point, all standard CPUs typically have the ability to do this now. Anyway, moving on. The way that displays work in this circumstance is that the more of them that you have attached to your graphics processor, whether that be a CPU, whether that be a graphics card, the way that this works is you are effectively splitting off the pressure to each display. And what we mean by that is it lowers the ability, it basically lowers the pressure and the performance of the pressure coming out of the video device, of the video graphics processor or whatever. It lowers that pressure, and so you get less and less performance. At some point, you can still use it. It's still very usable. It's still very, very high pressure, but you may get to a point where you have more pressure being let out than you do the ability for your graphics processor to provide that pressure, much like a power washer. Again, that's one of the ways. Another way that we can divide this display pressure out is also by the amount of graphics that we're putting through. So, for instance, if you are displaying to a single 1920 by 1080 display, which is a 1080p or 2K display, typically this display this display mechanism is fully supported and you can full bore at it. But if you increase that to a 4K display, what is it, 3968? I have no idea. 3980 by whatever, you lower that pressure. And so if you have more of those displays out, you lower it more and more and more. And you're effectively lowering the pressure or performance of the video card that's coming out, or the water that's coming out of the power washer, by expanding the amount of data that's going through. And the more of this that you drain out, the lower the pressure gets. And effectively, the more pressure you're putting, or the more work you're putting your video card through. Now, one of the other things that will affect this is something called refresh rate. So refresh rate is basically how often do the pixels on your screen refresh. And that is driven by the video card. Your video card can tell your displays to refresh at a specific rate. And if the display has the capability to do it, they'll refresh at that rate. And I think right now, the highest refresh rate on market currently is 300 hertz. I believe they came out with 600 hertz at CES this year. But right now it's 300 times a second. That's how many times your pixels will update. And effectively, the higher the refresh rate, the smoother the video is supposed to be. And in gameplay, that's supposed to have a theoretical benefit, because milliseconds matter in online gameplay. And it's supposed to look smoother, look nicer. But having higher and higher refresh rates also lowers the amount of pressure that is able to be put through. Because effectively what you're doing is you're letting out more water to get to the solution or to power wash the same amount of surface. So in the end, what will happen is if you stack all of these things on top of each other, meaning you have multiple displays and you have high resolutions and you have high refresh rates, what will end up happening is you will lower what is called the frame rate of your display. And frame rate is an interesting term because I said refresh rate earlier. It's kind of like that, but frame rate, what it literally means is the amount of frames per second that are produced by your graphics processor. And in reality, you, as a business user or somebody who's using it for business purposes, probably aren't going to need a high frame rate for use. You may need only 30 or 20 to make it to even do just normal stuff like typing up a spreadsheet, writing emails, writing documents, things like that. You don't need a high frame rate. But for things like video processing or anything that's video related or interactive related, anything that's going to be providing entertainment, you want a higher frame rate. So that way the image always looks nice and crisp and there's no lag. And the audio matches up with what you're doing. And you can actually have a circumstance where your frame rate is so low that it's actually behind the processing of those frames. And so your video actually lags behind everything else than what is going on your machine. And that can have significant impacts for a lot of stuff. In video processing or special effects editing, that can have an issue where you make a change and it doesn't reflect until 5 minutes later. And now you're just seeing the change and you realize, oh, this change that I made is absolutely mind-bogglingly dumb. Kind of like, you putting an image in a Word document and it just screws up your formatting everywhere. I'm sure everybody's had that experience at least once. But that's effectively how it will work if you screw up your frame rate by doing all of these things in tandem. So in the end, your displays are driven off of your video graphics processor. Now, GPUs, graphic processing units, these are isolated devices, independent peripherals that you add onto your machine. They go inside of your machine. They do have ones that you can use externally, but they aren't nearly as good or nearly as cheap. But these graphics processing units effectively are dedicated to this specific purpose. They are dedicated to processing video and displaying it in high quality, high definition methods so that you can see exactly what you're doing. And they cost a lot of money because it takes a lot of power to process graphics appropriately, because there are things like shading and physics and reflection and movement that are all part of how graphics work. And in order for a proper graphics processing unit to function, it needs to take all of this into account, which is why they are typically more expensive. And they have you may hear a whole bunch of stuff like teraflops. The graphics processing units have a higher teraflops level than any CPU on market. And it's because they are specifically dedicated to this type of calculation to provide high level detail to your displays. Now, all this being said, if you're pushing out a display to a crappy monitor or crappy TV or something like that can't handle the display, it doesn't matter how good your video card is. Your video card can't properly translate the image for your display to show to your eyes. Your eyes do kind of need to see everything that's going on, unless you're doing something like cryptocurrency and you just want to, murder hardware. Poor video cards getting murdered by cryptocurrency. But anyway, all that being said, in order to make sure all of the display and imagery that you want to occur in the way that you want it to occur, you have to make sure that everything is kind of copacetic. All of your peripherals along the line are working appropriately, meaning your CPU feeds information to your graphics processing unit. Your graphics processing unit is what makes the calculations and identifies and then displays out the detail. Your monitor is eventually what will display it out to you. And then, of course, your eyes matter too, because if you can't fucking see those colors or can't fucking see that movement, I might as well just burn money instead of spending money on a graphics card or anything like that. So all that being said, displays and graphics processing units are important for a lot of reasons. Gaming systems, your cell phones, even the dashboard on your car probably has some sort of graphics processing unit and is displaying data to you. And without these and the appropriate pressure behind them, you will not be able to read the data that is being put out. And I hope that kind of ties everything into one big fucking knot for you. And I hope you guys have a great day.